Hello and welcome to the March podcast episode. February. Well, it flew by. It's honestly, I feel like January, well, everyone says it. January kind of goes on forever, and then February is like you blink and it's gone. So this episode, Amelie is away, so we are joined by a guest. I was gonna say a guest judge, not a guest judge, a guest speaker. We're joined
I
by a
guess
guest.
present.
So we're here with Toby, who is a front of house staff member at Saffron Screen.
Hello, guys. If you come to the cinema, you'll recognise me as one of the chaps who sells refreshments, flogs you popcorn, tries to get you to put stuff in the correct bins at the end. One of those people. But if you don't come to Saffron Screen, then just hi, my name's Toby.
It's fabulous to have you here, Toby.
It's fabulous to
Yeah.
be here.
It's gonna be. I'm just so excited for the films that we're speaking about today. Like all of them.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. But first, because this is about film, I have a question for both of you. What is a film or some films that you have seen recently? And while you have a little think, I am just going to say, what have I seen? So I saw Argyle, Mean Girls, and The End We Start From. What have you guys been watching?
Well, I've been doing so I'm writing my dissertation right now at uni, which I'm doing film and TV, and so I've been having to watch a few films for study, and I watched Drive recently,
Mm.
which I hadn't seen before. It's kind of a thing. I'm doing a kind of a piece on literally me characters, these kind of like online characters where they're basically these like weird like loner men who like are just strange and weird, but like people on the internet are like, he's literally me. Like he is me. Like he represents who I am, and he is. There's so much about society. They have a very deep reading into it. And so I'm writing a kind of dissertation on this at the moment, and this is kind of one of the key films which these kind of literally me bros they kind of latch onto.
Wow.
And I watched it for the first time. It's actually pretty good. It's a very simple kind of sleek film, but
Yeah.
it's actually quite good.
Nice. I've seen a few films recently. I've seen the new Mean Girls, which my
Mm-hmm.
kind of thoughts on that are basically is a Muppets film where Renee Rapp is Michael Caine and everyone else is the Muppets. 2 days ago, as of recording this, the Les Miserables re-release. First time seeing that film, just what a film. That's fantastic. And then on Sunday, in commemoration of the cast of the new Fantastic Four film coming out next year being released, being announced, I watched the first one from 2005 with Ian Grufford
Oh.
and Jessica Alba and Chris Evans. An interesting watch, but the thing I liked most about it was that there was a 97-minute making of documentary, almost as long as the actual film itself. There was a whole second
Jeez.
disc full of extras. You don't get stuff like that anymore.
Bring back the 97-minute documentaries of the like behind the scenes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really interesting to watch films that aren't recent, and I don't know where I'm going with this. Anyway, moving swiftly into our kind of feature films of this podcast episode. We're starting with The Iron Claw, which is this film. I have a lot to say about this film, but also like not a lot to say about this film because that isn't in a bad way either. It was a lot in a good way. It's a true story of the Von Erich brothers, who are played by some great actors. I'm sorry if I'm sure you both are aware. I am a big High School Musical fan. I grew up with High School Musical. I am the kind of person that will sing now in the car to it and dance to it when I can.
No judgment here, honestly. I'm a bit like my family's like a big musical like family. So I mean, like High School Musical is not my cup of tea. I did watch it growing up, but
No,
like
that's fair enough.
no judgment. We do a lot of sing
No
songing in the car as
judgment.
well. So
No, that's fair enough. Like things aren't like everyone's cup of tea. So Zac Efron has the kind of he's playing one of the brothers, there's four brothers. He made the most impact, but not because of his skill and talent. It was more because he had the most screen time. All four brothers in this were absolutely amazing. So we had Zac Efron, who's obviously in High School Musical, Greatest Showman, Greatest Beer Run Ever in 2022. We had Jeremy Allen White, who is currently in The Bear on Disney Plus. Harris Dickinson, which he was recently in the TV show Murder at the End of the World and The Menu as well. And then Stanley Simmons, who plays the youngest brother of the Von Erich brothers. It follows them during the 1980s in the kind of competitive world of professional wrestling. And I don't know about either of you, but I don't have any interest in wrestling. Like, I don't have anything against it. I just don't, there's no interest for it there. So I was worried that I wasn't going to enjoy it because of that. But besides that, they experience like both tragedy, they have triumph, and they're both basically seeking for a larger than life immortality on the biggest stage in sports. I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember a lot of the details about this film simply because afterwards I immediately got into my car and I cried about it.
Oh.
It struck like a nerve within me, and it was done so well, and it had the right, like, it approached the topics in a really interesting way, but we'll get on to that.
Well, I think that it seems interesting because it feels like that's like a more of a film that you kind of like felt than you thought about almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, which I mean, to me, that is a sign of a good movie. And I mean, I'd be interested to see how much they sort of changed from fact from fiction, because obviously you said you felt they dealt with those really emotional issues quite well, but because it was obviously a real story, and I'm not proper into wrestling myself, although I have some vague kind of knowledge of wrestling because I know people who are into wrestling, and I'm into other things which are a bit similar. And so then the Von Erich family story is like super famous if you're a wrestling fan, like everyone kind of knows it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm kind of interested that obviously you're not a wrestling fan, but it's based on a true story. Presumably you didn't know the true story beforehand,
No.
and it really connected with you, and you felt like it was done in a really, I mean, at least from what I understand, quite a delicate way.
Yeah, it was because I had no idea about the story, and I actually, one of the questions I asked myself afterwards is if I had known the story of the brothers and the family, would I have been affected in the same way? Because I would have obviously known what happened. And I think part of what was so sad about it and made me cry was because I didn't know what was going to happen, but it kind of, the name, the Iron Claw, the reason it was called that kind of unfolded as the story went on, and then it kind of made more sense why it was called the Iron Claw. Again, in that situation, I think if I had watched it and I knew the story, I would have been paying attention to things like the cinematography, the lighting, the acting a bit more kind of in detail. But again, this is one of the films that I wasn't really paying much attention to any of that. It was simply because I was just like lost in the story, and I was kind of trying to figure out what was going to happen.
Yeah, I think they're probably quite aware of that though, because they've
Yeah.
actually, I think they're aware most people don't know the story. You know, if you just got wrestling fans in on this, it's probably not going to do that well. And in fact, they did some pretty, from what I understand, kind of some very quite like ahistorical sort of castings in terms of like Jeremy Allen White, who's like 5'8". Who does he play in the film? He plays Kerry Von Erich, who I believe was like, you know, like well over 6 foot.
Yeah.
And looked very different. So I think they all seem to be, you know, and they even, I think, ellipse certain of the brothers. Not all the brothers are in the film. They almost do seem to be treating it like characters, if you know what I mean, rather than a biography.
Yeah.
So for the people who are the sticklers for detail and kind of just know the whole thing inside out, it kind of might not do that much for them. But for people who are sort of coming to it with fresh eyes, they might get a little bit more out of it, because they'll be able to sort of, you know, not notice or kind of see past that kind of changing from what actually happened.
Yeah. It's I think it's one of those films that leans more definitely on the kind of the story side of it rather than the actual facts. But it's it's just from the trailer. I first watched the trailer. I had no idea it was coming out. I had no idea who was going to be in it. And I watched it and I was like, I kind of want to see it, but from the trailer, I know exactly what's going to happen. Like, they show everything. Like, you know that there's going to be a death. You kind of have a hunch it's going to be someone in the family, whether it's the dad or the brothers. You kind of know that there's going to be a funeral. there's wrestling obviously, and there's something to like that is the story, is the wrestling and kind of their career around it. That kind of put me off, because when I see a trailer like that, especially if it's like an action film or a comedy, I watch the trailer and I'm like, I really hope they haven't put all the funniest parts or the most like kick-ass bits in the trailer, because I'm gonna watch the film and it's gonna be like a letdown. And I thought it was one of them. And let me tell you, the trailer was just the tip of the iceberg. And
Really?
again, I think it would have been completely different if I had known the story, but I was kind of going in with a little bit low hopes because of the trailer. I was watching it and I was like, surely it can't get any worse in terms of like what was going to happen in the story, not in terms of the film. But I just kept asking myself that. I was like, surely like he's not going to do that. Like that's not going to happen. Where's it kind of going to end? And at the end of it, I was like, there's no way this is going to be a happy ending. Like after everything that's happened and after everything Zac Efron's character had been through, there's no way he's going to be happy, and it's not going to be a satisfying ending. Yes, it's an incredibly sad film from one point of view, but it kind of does leave you with that glimmer of hope, and the fact that Zac Efron's character kind of broke out of that curse. I'm not going to spoil loads, but this isn't really a big spoiler, but he ends up with 2 kids. Like he ends up married to
Is it Pam Atkinson?
Yes, Pam, yeah.
Yeah, it was Lily James's character.
Yes,
Right.
Lily
Yeah.
James. She was good
Lovely
at she was
James.
yeah, she was
Yeah, she's great at everything.
yeah,
Gorgeous.
exactly. And she doesn't have a big part in it, but that was just the story, but she was great in what she was in. I did really enjoy it, even though it was a sad film. It was it was difficult to watch because of the content. There was a lot of mental health. There was a lot of wrestling and kind of stepping over the line and kind of, is it worth it for the career or the win or whatever? So it was kind of brutal and dark in that way, but it does leave you with a glimmer of hope. And
Yeah.
like I said earlier, like the acting was just amazing.
The way you sort of describe it really reminded me of a feeling I had when I watched film last month actually. It was called Quiz Show, which is it was actually
Okay.
came out in the 90s. It's got Ray Fiennes, John Turturro in it. Robert Redford directed it, and that's like
Mm.
a real story as well. And it's really, it's really emotional, and you sort of like, and again, it's one where you really just buy into them as characters, and you get really, really immersed in it. And there's
Mm.
that kind of sinking feeling of like things are going bad, and all this terrible stuff is happening. And then you're sort of like jolted just as you watch the film, like, oh wait, this is real. Like, oh my
Mm.
God. Like, how could it get this much worse? Like kind of that sinking feeling of
Yeah.
like, as in you start to almost get more and more, I would say uncomfortable, but it becomes more and more poignant almost. You're like, oh my God,
Yeah.
and this was real. No, I mean, this is definitely one that I mean, I really wanting to get around to see, because it sounds like a really interesting story. And again,
Yeah.
and it seems like kind of the trend nowadays, like the telling a lot of real stories at the moment. We've
Mm.
had Priscilla and Oppenheimer and all of these, but I don't know.
Yeah. And I think it's done really well, because you do like very quickly start to kind of root for the main character. Like you
Mm,
want all of the brothers to kind of break free of the curse. And I think that's what kind of keeps you watching and not kind of be like, oh, this is too sad, I can't watch it. Like you want them to do good and do better. To be better, to not do better, but yeah, you want their lives to be better. The brotherly bond they have it was great, and I think that was another shining point of the film. Like their bond between each other, they just get each other. And there's a really touching scene at the end. Again, I won't give it away because it is like a big part of the film. But when you're watching it, like even though it is really sad, it's a moment where you're like, I'm so glad that these characters are getting to do this, like for themselves and each other. And
mm.
it's really, really touching, and it's even more touching than the actual end of the film. But I definitely don't be put off by the wrestling. Anyone listening, don't be put off by that, because it is obviously a major part of the film, but it's not just about
Mm.
that. The acting is incredible.
Actually, I wanted to ask you about that. There was a lot of talk about whether Zac Efron was snubbed of a Oscar nomination. I want to know how you felt about that. A lot of people felt that he maybe should
Mm.
have got a nomination. It didn't really get any nominations at the major awards circuits. It got a few lower down ones.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder how you felt about that.
Obviously, the Oscars are a massive thing, and it is an amazing achievement to have one. Although it kind of irritates me because there are so many people out there that have performed, in quotes, Oscar-worthy performances. I definitely think all of them, and obviously Zach, because he had the most screen time, and he had probably the most difficult scenes. I do think he warrants some kind of recognition because it's such an emotionally difficult film, and to portray like all of these emotions as Zach did must have been exhausting. But yeah, that's a tricky one because I do agree with the Oscars, but I also don't agree with the Oscars.
Well,
Yeah.
for some films, that sort of the recognition from kind of the wider audience sort of comes more with time.
Yes, yeah,
Sometimes maybe the film doesn't do that well on cinematic release.
yeah,
Sort of more over time, it sort of builds up more of a sort of cult following. So maybe Young Glory is going to be sort of more of that more within that category of films as opposed to the ones that sort of are really big. From the word go.
yeah. And I will just say the last thing I'm going to say about this is the actual again, now I'm thinking of it more, I'm kind of remembering bits and pieces, but the feeling of it being in the 1980s was perfect. The costumes, the way it was shot, it really felt like you were there in the 1980s with them. If people love a good story, love a good like emotional thing to bite into, definitely see this. And I don't think people will be disappointed. Like all the time, I hear people coming out of the screening and they're talking to one another and they're saying that the acting in it was incredible. So and so was incredible. People do pick up on these things, and I think that the audience will with one of these. So it's quite early on in March. And we've only got it on twice. So yeah, it's on Friday the March the 1st and Sunday the March the 3rd, and they're both on at 7:30. That's enough about the Iron Claw. I probably could go on forever about this one because, like I said, like I'm remembering things, and I wouldn't actually mind watching it again. But we're gonna pass over to our guest now.
Yes. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Wicked Little Letters.
I'm so excited. Go for
A
it.
film that has not actually come out yet. At the time of recording, it's due to premiere tomorrow, I think. But it was Sundance or something, one of the festivals last autumn, I think. I forget which one it was. But, one thing I noticed is, so it's directed by Thea Sharrock, who, fun fact, is the youngest artistic director in British theatre.
Wow.
I believe this is her first film, written by Johnny Sweet, who has written a few sitcoms and the such. But the main thing I noticed was how stacked the cast is. They're not joking around. This is, Barbie level, big casting, because the main lead is Olivia Colman, someone who needs no
Yes.
introduction. Timothy Spall plays her father, Dame Eileen Atkins, and then just so much a big cast because there's, just from what I'm got down in front of me, and John of Bazan, We Are Lady Parts, the Channel 4 comedy from a few years ago, Jessie Buckley, Chernobyl, Malachi Kirby, the 2016 reboot of Roots, and has sort of guest starred in lots of different programs. You kind of will sort of recognise his face if you don't know his name. Lolly Adopapi, who was Kitty in Ghosts, Gemma Jones, who was Madame Pomfrey in The Wizarding World, Hugh Skinner, who was Prince Wills in The Windsors, and young Harry in Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, Jason Watkins, Dodds in McDonald's and Dodds, and Mr. Shakespeare in Nativity. I'm a proper sort of Nativity kid. I watch them all every Christmas. I adore them. So that should be cool. And Alicia Wire, who was, of course, Matilda. And just as a slightly off-topic flex, but I met Alicia Wire at MusicalCon last year. She's tiny.
Wow. So cool.
I mean, for context, I am on the sort of 6'3", 6'4" mark, but she's tiny and she's Irish, which I hadn't realised until she was there. Anyway, so it's this massive cast, and sort of the impression I get is that there's not one person outshining the others. It's a proper ensemble piece, which I think is good.
It looks like that from the trailer, yeah.
It's produced by Film 4 and distributed by Studio Canal, who I'm sure, people who, you know, take interest in films will know them. They're obviously quite big, you know, producers and distributors of British films, and it is filmed in Sussex, in the towns of Arundel and Worthing. And hang on, I've done all this tangent. I should probably actually give a brief overview of what the film's about in case you haven't heard of it, shouldn't I? So basically, sort of in this sort of tiny little English town, sort of just after the First World War, people start getting letters with rude words in. Now, obviously, I'm not going to, you know, quote the trailer because I don't know the age of everyone watching this, and that would not be appropriate. But it's, you know, it's very bizarre language. You know, it's kind of not your standard insult, and you know, the main target of it is Olivia Colman, who's this sort of straight-laced, sort of prim and proper spinster, and the police are kind of sort of scratching their heads because they're just trying to figure out who has written these letters. And the main accusation is the character of Rose, played by Jessie Buckley, who's this young woman who's basically known for getting a bit rowdy in the pub, but that's basically her whole thing. And so they point the finger at her, even though she's got the sole custody of her young daughter after her husband died. So, you know, and so she gets arrested. She faces losing custody of her daughter, but then WPC Gladys Moss, played by Anjana Vasan, she doesn't think that it's Rose. But of course, you know, the glass ceiling, people don't take her seriously as a woman police officer, and she's basically told to mind out of the way. But, you know, she's convinced, and she sort of gets the other women in the town to sort of try and find out the real person who's sending all these letters. And it's kind of, it seems, obviously it's comedic, but it also seems like a very heartwarming film.
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. It sounds like it's one of those films which is absolutely hilarious, but it has like a really heart.
Yeah, sort of that very sort of heart and that sort of very important message.
Yeah.
You know, feminist message because of,
Yeah.
you know, because it very much examines how we, the British, view swearing and use of language, and how women in particular are more policed on their use of language. Like, I very much think no other country but the British could do this because we have a very unique relationship with swearing. You know, most Brits, you know, are in two camps: either swear a lot or they don't swear at all and think that swearing's, you know, the worst possible thing you could ever do. But it was filmed in the towns of Arundel and Worthing in Sussex, but it's actually based on a true story in Littlehampton, which is also in
Another
Sussex
true
nearby.
story.
Yeah, and I think it's also very relevant for today, both not just because of the feminism sort of aspect to it, but the fact that, you know, there is this constant debate about free speech rights, you know,
Yeah.
cancel culture. So I had a look at some of the reviews. Obviously, there aren't that many out because it's not out yet, but some of the reviews. Empire Online said it was like a swearier Paddington film or Ealing comedy. It just was an interesting analogy. And basically, they said it's an ensemble of beloved British comedy actors playing assorted oddballs.
Oh, I love it.
You know, some of the people very eccentric. Radio Times called it an enjoyable farce and a perverse twist in your typical period comedy, which I think that seems all correct. And it seems like, apart from the swearing aspect of it, kind of almost seems, you know, in that category of films that kind of, you know, a couple of years after their cinematic release, just seem to be on TV on bank holidays all the time. One film that came out recently, which I think will very much be, you know, within this group, is Next Goal Wins.
It's it's the tea and a biscuit film, isn't it?
Yes.
You know, afternoon tea and a biscuit film.
Yeah, very much kind of not as much, you know, an evening one, but an afternoon one. You're right there.
Bit of a kind of a bit of a lighter film that's still enjoyable, still has some heart to it, but it's like, you know, you don't have to. It's not the Iron Claw. That's what we're saying.
No, it's not. It's really not.
You know, not one you kind of have to sort of take too seriously, and it's kind of just, you know, a funny film with some funny words in. And, you know, if you giggle at that sort of thing, if you like that sort of thing, I think you'll like it. If you're sort of more into it, sort of looking at it from sort of a study of the use of language, I think you'll like it. If you're kind of like, you know, into the whole vibe of 1920s English villages, then you might like it. But I should also add that it's rated 15. with good reason.
I was wondering about
Yeah.
that because obviously
Yeah.
it can't be a PG, obviously.
No,
And
can't
then I
be a
was like,
PG.
yeah,
Can't be, so it is rated 15, which I think is probably for the good reason, but I'd imagine that is just for the actual language itself, as
yeah,
opposed to, because, from what I can tell, there's no violent content, there's no sexual content, there's nothing particularly upsetting in it. I
no,
think it is just the
No.
swearing.
yeah,
So it almost sounds like a bit of a shame in a way, even though it's like inherent to the plot, obviously, the swearing, but because it sounds like quite a nice film to watch with the family, doesn't it? Like
yeah,
Yes.
otherwise, like,
With
but
the older
I mean,
children,
maybe if,
perhaps.
yeah, maybe a bit older.
Yes, if your kids are 15 and above, then this is a
yeah.
Yeah.
great choice for family film. Maybe when your grandma at home, but,
Yeah, she might have a problem with it. Yeah.
yes.
It does seem like one of those films that obviously I know there's the age kind of restriction, but it's one of those films where you can watch with anyone. You can like it's got that recipe of people are gonna love it.
Yeah,
That's a bold move to say without actually seeing it myself,
Mm.
but it just
yeah,
seems like one of those films where people are going to come in like the group, the masses to come and see it because you've got the
yeah,
stars, you've got the outrageous comedy,
yes,
you've got the period kind of timepiece, and even
yeah,
like around like we're in the east of England. We're close to Suffolk, we're close to Norfolk, we're close to that
yeah,
kind of that feel of that town.
yes,
And when I saw like the location in the trailer, I was like, oh, that reminds me of like when I went to Norfolk, and
yeah,
I know these kinds of this part of
yes.
England.
Sort of the little towns and the kind of
Yeah,
the attitudes that kind of almost prevail, kind of the everyone knows everyone's business,
yeah,
and
exactly.
one person sort of steps outside of the norms. Whatever you
Hmm.
like, come along. And if you want to come along and see Wicked Little Letters, it is showing a grand total of 6 times in
It
the time of
is.
March. So, 8th and 9th of March at 7:30, the 10th of March at 2:30, the 11th of March at 7:30, the 16th of March at 2:30, and the 17th at 7:30. So, plenty of opportunities to come and see it. And I hope my rambles have convinced people to come and see it.
It's made me more excited. I'm just,
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Glad.
It's kind of put a smile on my face just hearing you talk about it, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's like
I'm glad I have that effect on people. And I'm just gonna say, on behalf of everyone, if you do listen to the podcast and you come along to see something on the basis of this podcast, do tell a member of staff because,
Yes.
even if we're not around that day, it will get fed back to us. We will
Yes.
know. And it'll be nice to know that we're having an impact on,
Yes.
other people. We're becoming influencers.
oh,
Maybe
I
not,
don't
maybe
know
it's a
if I
little
like that
far.
term.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Oh dear. But it does it makes it not worth it because it is worth it. But
Good.
it's nice to know that people are listening and we're not just chatting into the abyss about film. Thank you. That was very exciting and I'm so ready. Like I was sold at Olivia Colman and then I saw it had so many other people in it. It's just it looks brilliant. Zach, go ahead.
Yes, so I'm going to be talking about another new release we have, which is All of Us Strangers. This is again another British film, again funded by Film 4. It's described as a romantic fantasy film.
Oh,
Not quite sure. It is that, but it's a lot more complicated, I think. It's directed by Andrew Haigh. This is a British film. It's starring Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal, who are actually both Irish, but it's a British film. Paul Mescal plays Harry, and Andrew Scott is the lead role as Adam. It's actually based off a Japanese ghost story called Strangers, which it was written in the 1980s. It's actually been adapted in Japan before, and it's a very different sort of treatment of the story. But the kind of the premise that they share is they're about a screenwriter. Here, it's this screenwriter called Adam. He's very lonely in London, lives in this big tower block, and essentially he begins to sort of visit his childhood home again, and he sees his parents there, who we know have since passed away. He begins having these conversations with them, and he kind of goes back there throughout the whole sort of film. The main sort of tension of the story is about the fact that Adam's gay, and he never told his parents. They never knew. And now he gets to kind of have this opportunity to almost talk to their ghosts in a way, or however you interpret their presence. And sort of going alongside this is this kind of romance that he has with Paul Mescal's character, which is kind of a subplot which is sort of interweaved into this relationship that he has with his parents. Again, I have to say we're being very positive on this podcast, and I'm going to be positive again. I really like this film. It really gets you inside the head of the Adam character is the main thing. It's very, very visceral. There are just so many scenes where he really just has all this pent up kind of grief and sadness in him, and he has these kind of terrible visions and experiences when he's clubbing, and everything is going wild, and he has these flashbacks and he can't see and he's screaming, and so and so the sound design and the editing and all of it is really, I don't want to say aggressive, but it's one of those ones where I kind of jumped in my seat a few of the kind of hallucinations and visions that he has in this one, because they're really quite gripping. Yeah, and it's weird because of that, because it's so psychological in nature, and because it's almost this ghost story. It's based on based on a ghost story. It almost slightly feels like a horror film in some ways. It's
Yeah,
not
that's really
like
interesting.
if you're scared of horror films, you can still see this film. But it has that kind of those devices, those kind of structures, and it's really interesting that they've kind of chosen to focus on sort of when they kind of give it its genre classification, when they sort of promote it, that it's romantic, that it's a romantic film, that it's sort of a fantasy film, because it has this element of obviously people who've come back to life in some way.
Like from watching the trailer and seeing like the promotional clips and stills, it feels like I know exactly what I'm, and I don't mean this in a bad way. It feels exactly like I know what I'm going to walk into, the type of film, and the type of content, and even the pace of it. It feels like I know what to expect, but also that's not off-putting to me. I'm quite interested because of the actors, and I want to see their performances. But now that you've said it's like kind of a ghost story, which I knew that kind of side of it before tonight, but the way that you've described it is really intriguing, and it kind of makes me want to look more into it, and like into the like origins of it, and yeah.
I think the original story, the Japanese story, is that he's a TV screenwriter, and I think he begins to he sort of strikes up a friendship with like another couple who bear like a strong resemblance to his parents, and he sort of starts to realize might be his parents.
Okay.
Whereas in this, it's quite obvious from the get-go they're his parents. In fact, they don't even have names besides being his parents. It's just Adam's mum and dad. They're never even named in the film. So it's quite obvious from the start, and we kind of find out quite early as well that they have died. They never tell you, and he never reacts really like they are ghosts, but it almost feels like a dream. And I wonder if this element will relate to other people. Listen, it's dealing with a universal theme, which is grief.
Yeah.
So it's just something everyone goes through. And it really reminded me of a dream that, I don't mean to get too personal here, but a dream that I would have with my nan who passed away, like where I would have these dreams where she was there again, and I would talk to her, and I would know she's dead.
Yeah.
And you'd sort of be at dinner with her, and you're kind of talking about all the things that have happened since, and it's like cathartic in a way to be able to talk and get these things out. But at the same time, it's quite stressful and sad, especially since in this case they're kind of aware of the fact that they start asking him like how did we die, and all of that kind of stuff. So it's quite, it's that double, and then sometimes he doesn't get a satisfying reaction in terms of how they react to him. The fact that he's come out as gay, and they don't quite always have the reaction that he wanted, but he's trying to finally have this kind of question sort of answered, finally for him. You experienced grief, and you've kind of not been able to say goodbye in the way that you wanted, or say everything you want to say to someone. You felt that it was unfinished. I think it's probably something that you'll relate to in this film. A lot of people have talked about this idea of sort of universality. It's obviously a gay kind of, it's about him being gay, and the gay relationship is at the forefront. And so some people think, oh, my, obviously like the majority heterosexual audience is sort of like, oh, am I going to be able to relate to this? But I really think you can, like I said with my nan, like you just like almost that opportunity just to talk about things you never told, someone who's passed. It's I think everyone's going to relate to that, but it's obviously not that they're gay for most people.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Whoever you are on the planet, like you can't hide away from grief. It's going to affect you some one way or another, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think a lot of the hype around this film is obviously the acting. Do
Mm.
you like have you seen Paul and Andrew Scott in other things, and how do you like where do you think it fits onto their scale of awesomeness?
Yeah, so I think this is one of his best performances, if not his best.
Oh,
I really
wow.
was quite shocked that he wasn't nominated at the Oscars. I know there's a lot of great people, so you
Yeah,
can't
no,
nominate
no, yeah.
everyone. So I'm not going to like throw shade at people, but like I really did think he was quite great here. I mean, it was even the filmic language, just what Andrew Haig did with it as well. But his performance really, I mean, it made me tear up like a lot throughout. And I'm not someone who cries easily in movies.
No, no, yeah.
No, his performance was like really excellent. And even though you've seen him in sort of different roles, maybe you think of him as Moriarty in Sherlock, he
Mm.
really doesn't bring that baggage with him that he's some eccentric villain, like, or
Yeah.
anything like that.
He sort of has
He's
a
just
vulnerability to him, do you mean? The kind of you maybe kind of don't see in other things, do you mean?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because there's this part that he's really lonely. So when this Paul Mescal character comes into his life, it's really like a kind of a saving grace, and he tries to latch onto it. And he's trying to latch onto the ghosts of his parents. He's clearly has a lot of things that are unresolved for him, and he's super lonely, and he's in denial about it. And he is super vulnerable. I mean, there's this really heartbreaking conversation he has with his mum, where he comes out as gay to his mum, and she's sort of has fairly, she's not homophobic per se, but she's got some old-fashioned sort of perspectives on it.
Mm,
And she says, "Oh, isn't being gay, isn't that quite a lonely life?" And then he goes, "No, no, no, mum, they don't say that anymore." And
mm,
then she's like, "So you're not lonely then?" And he's like, "Well, and he doesn't have that
mm,
answer for it because he is really lonely." And it's that, I mean, he doesn't want to admit to it, especially in that context. So it's got like really great writing. Again, it's not one of those ones that's based on a true story or thing. Obviously, it's an adaptation of a ghost story, but I
mm.
know Andrew Haig, I think the director and writer put a lot of his own sort of experiences into the film. And so I can only imagine that must have been because you just feel so personal throughout.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say is I've been focusing a lot on the grief bit. There is also a lot of this romance kind of plot, which is interweaved with it,
Yeah.
with Paul Mescal's character. For me, I wasn't really happy when he was getting with Paul Mescal's character. I didn't quite find him as compelling as I think the story wanted you to. I thought the way he integrated into the other story was good in terms of he was like, look, I'm getting happy, and
Yeah.
you know don't worry about me when you say goodbye. I have someone, that kind of thing, and them kind of adjusting to the fact that he has this relationship. I almost appreciated it in concept, but then when I was sort of like, if he is going to have to say goodbye to his parents, I don't actually like Paul Mescal's, Harry, the character,
Mm.
that much that I would actually be super satisfied with him living a life with him or that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I know what
But
you
other
mean.
people, other people might feel differently though.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how it kind of balances with that and kind of if I perceive it the same as you do kind of thing. Because it does feel like that way, like exactly how you explained it. Like that's what I'm expecting. That it is mainly about the parents and then like the relationship side of it is kind of not on the side, but it's not as a big of a plot thing, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's sort of, it is in his romance is sort of in service of that. And they do give Paul Mescal's character sort of his own things that are going on. That's the thing. I wasn't like, I didn't think Harry, the character, was uninteresting. I just thought I didn't like him as much as I wanted to. But he has his own sort of, clearly his own sort of struggles, and which definitely kind of come, which you also get resolution on. So he's sort of a story in his own right, which is kind of told sort of, as sort of an undercurrent in Andrew Scott's story, who is really the main character. And the thing actually I should mention with this, it's a really limited cast,
Yeah.
really limited cast. It's
Yeah.
Andrew Scott, Paul Mescal as his love interest, Harry, and then Jamie Bell as his father, and then Claire Foy, who actually gives a really terrific performance. I think she was nominated for a BAFTA for it, as his mother. and I think there's a waitress at one point, and these are all the kind of listed parts in the film.
Wow.
Otherwise, there is some extra work in a club and things like that. But
That
otherwise,
is
it's really
impressive.
like, yeah, it really brings, it's a character
Yeah,
study. It
very.
really is a character study. And so, yeah, even though Paul Mescal is the supporting character, because it's
Yeah.
not overloaded with character,
Yeah.
he still gets his own kind of exploration. There's still time for that.
One question I have, just as you said about this sort of limited cast and kind of the things they explore. Do you think it would make a good stage show if they were sort of to adapt it into a stage show? Because kind
Ooh.
of from what you've described, it kind of sounds like maybe it could.
I think you probably could. It, okay, it's really interesting because I think filmically it's brilliant. And I think you
Yeah.
would lose something if you took it to a stage show, but it's got a
Oh
very
yeah.
limited cast and very limited locations. It's sort of like there's the house, like his parents' house, which is, by the way, is Andrew Haig's his parents' actual house they
Oh,
filmed in.
wow.
Crikey.
Yeah, so it's obviously very personal for him. And then they've got his apartment, and we've got a few exteriors. We've got a club scene, so I think it is kind of adaptable to the stage. But I think what you lose is you have these brilliant sequences of where he's really, you sort of have because it's got this dreamlike quality to this. Are they ghosts? Is he dreaming? Is he imagining? And the film there's something individually specific about it being a film that makes it great as well. Like I said, the sound design in this film is really brilliant. It's really loud when I watched it.
Is the soundtrack as good as the trailer?
Yeah, there's a lot of good music in it as well. But yeah, overall I'd say it was really good. I have some problems with it. Like I say, I didn't find the Paul Mescal character quite as compelling as I thought maybe he should have been, or quite as likable as quite he should have been. But again, it's got kind of these universal themes, even though, maybe on the surface you might go, oh, it's a gay film. It's not just a gay film, although I imagine you'll probably respond to it in a unique way as well if you are gay. But this is also one to look out for. It was nominated for 6 BAFTAs. Unfortunately, didn't win anything. But again, this is a big, it is a film with some cultural capital. So if you're someone who's in on having opinions on the awards and all of that, it's also one to see. And if you are interested in seeing it, you can see it on Saturday, the 2nd of March at 7:30, and it's playing again on the Monday, the 4th of March, also at 7:30.
So we really hope that you are feeling the passion of cinema. The way that well, I hope that we're convincing you to come and see these films, but also I hope we're encouraging you to talk about the film with other people as well, because it really does open up a whole kind of different world of conversations, and it's really cool to think to hear about what other people think of the things that you think about. That was a big sentence, but I know what I was trying to say. But for March, there are, again, I said this about February and probably January, but there are so many films that I'm really excited about. And so far the films that I have been excited about, they have lived up to that excitement. But in March we have February half term, we've got Migration on. It's the same, I think we mentioned it in the February one as well. It's the same people who did Despicable Me and Minions.
Mario.
Yes, yeah. It's
Mario's Secret Life of Pets.
oh
They've done
yeah.
sort of quite a lot of sort of big animated films in the
Yeah.
past sort of decade and a half. Sort of essentially sort of anything that's not Disney, Pixar, or DreamWorks is probably Illumination.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah.
And I feel like it's living up to those, because I mean the numbers at Saffron Screen have been amazing. Like we've had
You're
100,
doing well, and it was
yeah,
so nice
150 or
because
something
I
today.
was working on it this afternoon. It was so nice seeing so many people who don't usually come to the cinema, and hopefully
Yeah.
it was including some kids. It was their first experience of cinema, and
Yeah.
that was really nice.
Migration is on again a few more times in March. We also have a relaxed screening on the 17th of March, which is a Sunday. It's a Sunday morning. And a relaxed screening is basically the lights don't go down as much, there's no trailers or adverts, it's not as loud, so we turn the volume down on the film.
You may find a trip to cinema overwhelming, in the
Yes.
standard fashion.
Exactly, yeah. So we cinema is for everyone, so we want to make it as accessible as possible. And Migration is turning out to be a great film, although I haven't seen it just yet. But I'm looking to see it. We also have for the kids the Jungle Bunch World Tour, which I believe is on the first weekend of March. But it's looking to be great. I mean, the
Yeah,
kids films are always funny, so I always
yeah,
try
it'll
and
be
see them
funny at
just as
least.
yeah.
Yeah.
They're usually really light-hearted and funny, but actually really quite serious when you think about the message. And that is just yeah, it's refreshing to see something like that. So
But maybe if you're looking for something maybe a bit more mature, you might say. We've got Dune Part 2, which is the sequel to I'm sure a lot of people will remember Dune from a few years ago, Denis Villeneuve's sci-fi epic. So this is the second part of that, I believe, in a Dune trilogy. That's on at 7 o'clock on the 15th of March, the 16th of March, and then it's on at 2:30 on the 17th of March, and then for a final time at 7 o'clock on the 18th of March.
And as well as some awesome films, we've also got at the cinema some special events this month. So on the 3rd of March, we've got Painting the Modern Garden, Monet to Matisse, which is an interactive arts on screen exhibition. Next Sunday, the 10th, as part of our special musical season, which is over a few months, we've got Titanic the Musical. On Thursday, the 28th, we've got the next in our ever popular series of National Theatre Lives. This time it's The Motive in the Queue. And then on the 31st of March, we've got something from the Royal Opera House, Madame Butterfly. So lots of cultural experiences in there. And also, we couldn't possibly let you lovely listeners go without letting you know something very exciting. On the 24th of March at 7:30 p.m, This Blessed Plot, which is filmed in nearby Thaxted, which is about 15 minutes away from the cinema, and it's got a special Q&A with the writer Adam Gans and the director Mark Isaacs, which should be very interesting. It looks like a very good film,
I think
and
that'll be good.
I think that's going to be a very fun night, so do come along.
So is there any last words for our frame by frame listeners?
Thank you for having me. It's been really nice to sort of jump on this episode, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to me. If you have enjoyed listening to me, then my name has been Toby, the front of house wonder that I am at Saffron Screen. If
Oh,
you
I
haven't
love
enjoyed me, don't worry, normal service will resume next month. I'm sure Emily will be back, but hopefully you have enjoyed my rambles.
Oh no, it's been so nice to have you on it.
Yeah.
Thanks for
It's
jumping
been
on.
fun.
Seriously, yeah, no, it was really fun to do this with you. So yeah, I mean, we'll have to have you back on at some point again
Yes.
because
Yes, that'd
yeah,
be cool.
no, you're a
Yeah.
natural. You're a natural.
Thank you very much.
Well, no, thank you for both of you, and thank you for sticking it out to our listeners. And hopefully, we will see you at the cinema.